as were neighborhood leaders and citizens across those areas to try and get some feedback. So we're going to get a report on that. And as we also discussed last meeting, we're going to talk about potential funding options. So we have national experts there to kind of give us a lay of the land on what has worked in other communities. But to get started, we will need to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which took place on June 5th. How about a motion in that direction?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All right. Any comments or questions on the agenda or on the minutes? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. On to item 3, and this is going to be the report to us on these work group meetings. And I want to thank the staff here for staffing all of these. You all know that community meetings can go in a lot of different directions, and you got to be prepared. So to do 7 of these in a 3-day span is quite an undertaking. So I appreciate it. I'm sure the rest of the members do here. And so I'll ask Diane to give us a report.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. As you stated, we did have several meetings starting last Thursday, actually. And so it has been a bit of a whirlwind, to say the least. I feel like I'm repeating myself continually, but so if I leave something out, just feel free to jump in and ask me any questions. Just quickly on the agenda, as the mayor mentioned, I'll be going through the community and stakeholder work group information, and then we'll have Brian and Dan start a discussion basically on funding and finance. So the first round of these work group meetings, we really wanted to hold these so that we could start to engage the stakeholders as well as the community in the process. And much like we involved you all in setting goals for us right in the beginning so that you could kind of steer the way the study went, we wanted to engage the stakeholders and the community in a process that kind of you all looked at the region overall and the entire study, which encompasses those 3 corridors, whereas we really wanted to go to each one of those corridors, have a different stakeholder and community meeting with them, and really focus in on, is there any particular goals in particular that are focused on your corridor, what's your perspective. So really kind of not looking at that regional perspective which you all set, but really focusing in on the corridors themselves. So that's what we've been doing since the 11th of July. We had, an average attendance of about 15 for the stakeholder meetings and less than that for the community. We wanted these to be smaller groups. We invited anywhere between like 25 and 40 people to each one of the meetings. So getting about half attendance on the stakeholder is around where we thought we might be. So I think we came in target there. Getting about a third on community, why we like to have more. Always want more. We want everyone to show up. Unfortunately, sometimes during the summer it's difficult. People are gone for vacations, that sort of thing. And it's during the evening, so you're asking people to be away from their families and to come in after days of work if they do, if they're still working, that sort of thing. So we got about a third, of the people we invited, essentially, at those meetings. We did have an unfortunate incident at the East Corridor meeting in the evening for the community meeting. I like to say, kind of like baseball, we got rained out. If you guys remember, that was when we had a really pretty big deluge of rain come down right when our people were supposed to be getting in their cars to come to our meeting. So we ended up with just a few representatives showing up, and we asked them to go ahead and attend the Central Oklahoma City meeting the next day, which they did. So that was good. In that East Corridor meeting, we got a lot, the one we did have earlier in the day, the stakeholder one, we got a lot of information from a good cross-section of people, so we ended up with what we needed anyways. But just to give you a general sense, we wanted to give a brief overview of what the study was, set the playing field as people started thinking about goals and objectives for the study. So we gave them that nice overview. We kind of zoomed in depending on which corridor we were dealing with that evening. We focused in and told them a little bit about the existing conditions of that corridor. So talked about population, employment, and major activity centers in that corridor, just to kind of frame the reference for them. And then we also talked about modes under consideration for this study. So we talked about everything from commuter rail, light rail, bus rapid transit to express bus, and really tried to explain the differences between them all, so that people could understand also what exactly are we considering in the study from a technology standpoint, if you will. At each one of the meetings, we conducted interactive sessions, much like we did again with you all on the goal setting, where we separated you out into groups, and then we made you roll up your sleeves and work. We asked them to do the same. Everyone was really cooperative, and they got some really good discussions going. I was really impressed with the amount of concern and dialogue that was occurring. It was really hard to quiet everyone down and get them to stop talking about it so that we could report out. So I was impressed from that standpoint. Sometimes it's really hard to get people going on some of those interactive sessions, but these groups did not have that problem, so I was happy to see that. The way we conducted them is, like I said, we broke them out. We had them look at what your regional transit dialogue overall study regional perspective goals were, and then think specifically about their corridor and come up with any that perhaps they felt needed to be added. After we did that, they reported out, and then we had them individually vote on what they thought represented an important goal to be covered in the study for their corridor. So we'll go over those results today. We also then asked them for an exercise of looking at example objectives. So a little bit later on in my presentation, I'll kind of go through and explain how we use the information that we got from them, the goals, what does it mean to have the objectives, and how we use them moving forward. But what we did was we asked them to basically look at your goals, your regional goals that were established. Ian and myself and the team basically came up with typical transit objectives, if you will, based off of your goals that really are measurable and more specific than goals. So, you know, goals you're kind of out here in the more general time frame, and then you or frame, and then you hone in a little bit more on the objectives and really think about specific and measurable. So we had them basically look at the different objectives that we had, and once again as a table, kind of select the ones they liked best. So we went through that, and that was helpful as well, because it helps us frame, as you'll see in the future, the matrix that we use to start ranking and looking at corridors and alternatives. So the other thing we had them do was we had them look, you guys will probably recognize these were the goals that you all set up for the overall study or the regional perspective. And so then we asked them what they felt, thinking regionally, was the most important. Every single time, we pretty much came out with almost a flat line across the board on all of the different goals, ranking pretty much evenly on what people felt was important. And what that really says to me, and I think to you all, was you did a really good job of thinking regionally, thinking what's important from all aspects of the community. And so, you know, it was really kind of started getting funny after about 3 days in, and we kept seeing these types of responses coming back. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of that. So to get into each one of the corridors, and then in addition to each one of the corridors developing goals specific to their corridor, we really thought as we started preparing for these that Oklahoma City itself is really kind of a nexus for all of these. It's where all of the corridors are really kind of coming in and joining into each other, if you will. And so it was definitely important to really understand from the Oklahoma City perspective if there was anything that needed to be considered as well. So we did meet with Oklahoma City yesterday, and we had our meeting and also went through the same process with them. So just to quickly kind of go over the goals that ranked out the top once they talked about them, reported out on them, and then voted on them. In the South Corridor, this combines both the stakeholder and the community into the same, okay? So, excuse me, So in the South Corridor, they were really concerned. They really liked the fact that they have an existing express bus service with the Sooner Express. They really thought that that type of service, being reliable and convenient and maybe expanded and built upon, was something that they felt was important. So provide a reliable and convenient service is what they kind of came out with. Additionally, they were really thinking about how transit and land use can really come together, and a little bit of the chicken and egg discussion was going on of whether you start to change your zoning and your codes to promote a more dense land uses around potential stations, or whether it's the transit comes in and then that happens. So they were really interested in that idea of transit and land use being coordinated and working together. Under the North Corridor, their main, which is actually number 2 on here, we probably should have put it first, but the main thing that we heard from the North Corridor was really the idea of how do we all as a region work together to make sure that we can fund this, both from a capital perspective, but then also from an operations and maintenance ongoing perspective. So they were really bent towards the financial and funding side, so I know that
Easy.
I know that they might be interested in the discussion today. And then also they wanted, and we heard this often, really an ease of use with the transit service. They really wanted it to be user-friendly, and they wanted a focus so that everyone could use it. So to have the ability to have park-in rides for those who want to drive to it, have bike paths and connections and amenities for bikers or pedestrians, so that it's multimodal and really it can be utilized by anyone. Was North Corridor. I think my voice is starting to go after talking for so many days here. On the East Corridor side, again, this is where you start to see that the different corridors really have different perspectives. So I'm glad we went through this exercise. In the East, they're really, we're talking a lot about Tinker, which makes a lot of sense. You know, you really have this great employer there, single largest in the region, and it's a major activity center, but they recognize that they really want that to be connected not only within their East Corridor limits, if you will, and into Oklahoma City, but they really want to access the rest of the region through it, to be able to bring employees into Tinker from Edmond, from Moore, from, you know, all over the region. So that was one that was important. And they included the idea of last mile, again, providing the service to be easy to use, have people be able to get from the rail or the bus station and get to the front door of where they're going, or to get from the front door of their home to the rail or bus station. So that was an important one as well. So with East Corridor as well, they have a great asset there in the form of an existing freight rail right-of-way that at this point in time does not have any existing freight rail running on it, at least for a portion of it. And so, you know, they were being really thoughtful from the standpoint of thinking, you know, maybe we might not have rail at first, we might have bus at first, who knows, we'll see as the study develops. But we think it's important to think about preserving that existing asset for the future, so that we could expand in the future if we wanted to, or if it made sense. So that one I thought was a really thoughtful, goal to bring forward from the East Corridor. Now, Central Oklahoma City, when we talked with them, you know, their perspective was really on bringing the idea of partnership, and that really Oklahoma City and all the other municipalities and entities have to stand shoulder to shoulder, holding hands or locking arms, whatever you want to say, to really make this move forward. So it's that idea of, you know, really needing to think about how do those partnerships get formed. So kind of the early thoughts of governance is what I see in that as well, which, you know, kind of came up when when we talk about funding, kind of governance goes hand in hand. So, and then the other idea that came out was kind of a long thought, and I'm really good at bringing out long thoughts when I was combining at every single table. We were trying to combine everything we could to come up with a nice meaty goal. So this one was to really empower the communities along the different alignments, making, again, it accessible to people, convenient and efficient, but at the same time, as you build or make these transit investments, which are large capital investments that happen, that people along the corridors, within the communities along the corridors, can also benefit from the economic development maybe, or perhaps it's even from the construction side of it, and having jobs available for the local people. So that was something that, with the empowered communities part of it, we were trying to capture there in Oklahoma City. So these were the goals that they came out with, that they wanted us to present to you all today for consideration to be added. The way we would do this would be, we would have your goals that were the regional perspective goals. And then for each corridor, as we study those independently, we would add in some objectives and matrix examples from each one of those, from each one of their particular goals. Now what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll kind of show you in a little bit more detail how we use them, so you can kind of make that determination. And then we can go back to this slide if we need to. So how we use this information. Here's just a flow through of a typical sample goal, the resulting objective, and then what a criteria would be for us as we start to look at different alignments and compare them. So enhanced regional connectivity was one that you all came up with, of course that's shortened, but one that you all came up with from the regional perspective. And so what does that mean? If you're going to enhance regional connectivity, when you step back and think about that, it's really how do you connect people to where they want to go from where they are. So it's really maximizing connections between activity centers in the region. And then what we would do would be coming up with a criteria to measure that. So it's really coming from the really qualitative goal to the quantitative as much as we can. So that would be literally counting the number of activity centers connected by the alternatives and the types within that. Here's an example. Now this is from a completely separate project, so we haven't done all the work yet. But I did want to show you an example so you can start to understand what we'll be coming back to you with in fall. So on the left is the goal, again, enhance regional connectivity, staying with that particular example, provide connections to activity centers, and then we would literally count those up in our system, and we would come up, compare them against each other, and come up with highs to low, including medium. And at the bottom, across the bottom, you can see total points. And we actually then have, in this particular example, alternative 1 came out on having the most points and being the highest. So this is just a way to, you can understand how we take the goals, turn them into objectives, and then really turn them into a matrix. So we're not just taking the goals and kind of putting them at the front of a document, we're actually using them as we move forward with the project, and it really does affect your results from that standpoint. So this is how we use them. So if we go back up here, again, here are the different goals that were suggested to us to bring forward to you all for your consideration. And I guess as far as if anybody has any comments or if we want to discuss that at all. Yes.
On the next slide, you showed us the kind of rough example there, the one with all the colors in it.
Yeah.
Do you consider every one of those to be as important as the other, or is there ever a weighting system?
Thank you. That's a great question. It really depends usually on the steering committee, this group here, whether they want to weight individual ones or not. And I think in this example, did we weight the goal, or did we weight each individual?
We weighted each individual criteria.
Okay,